Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week, we're chatting with Tamara Cameron, former farmers market manager and executive director of the Boise Farmers Market, about how to find a replacement when a leader is ready to move on. I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager, but lately an even more active consultant, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer and marketing director for Farmers Market Pros.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Food for All, making it easy to sell local food online, build relationships, and improve margins. Food for All makes it simple to accommodate online orders for pickup at your farmers market. Their straightforward portal streamlines setup and management of your online marketplace, keeping admin time and staff costs to a minimum while increasing producer profitability. It's flexible, easy to use, and loved by producers, customers, and market managers. Find more information by clicking the Food for All logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. Today we are joined by our friend Tamara Cameron, former farmers market manager and executive director of the Boise Farmers Market. Tamara worked for the Boise Farmers Market for over 4 years, implementing new software programs, harnessing an impressive volunteer force, and leading them through the trials and tribulations of COVID-19 by implementing systems to keep farmers farming and shoppers shopping. She recently helped the Boise Farmers Market find and train a new leader as she moves on from hands-on market life. Welcome back to Tent Talk, Tamara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really glad to talk to you today. So last time we talked to Tamara was back in September 2020 when we were all navigating COVID-19 health and safety protocols. I can't believe that. Sounds like it was like 10 years ago, but
yeah,
I remember
it.
Oh my gosh, it's like burned
too
in our
well.
brains.
Yeah.
Still too soon.
Still too soon. I'm just having like a flashback of when we were talking to you on the podcast. And I was like, you're doing what? How are you doing
Like,
that?
wait, can you send us some volunteers, please?
Yes. Oh, it was really helpful. So can you give us a little bit of an update about like what happened between late 2020 and when you decided to step away from the Boise Farmers Market?
So as we all know, 2020 was not a picnic. 2021 was a little bit better, but we still were kind of shifting back and forth between what was required for safety procedures from the city and how we wanted to do the farmers market. So it really was still kind of a trying year. 2022 was amazing. We had a really good year, which was so nice and such a refreshment from the craziness of the 2 prior years. But yeah, 2022 went really well, and we were back to kind of a normal farmers market, still some folks masking and things like that, but sales were up, which was really great. It was really good to be able to serve the vendors in the straightforward, normal farmers market way. And we had increased crowds and increased sales. 2022 was wonderful. So deciding to step away, I was here in Astoria with my son. I was coming to visit often as I could, because I love it here and I missed being by the water. I lived in San Francisco for 12 years out by the beach, which I loved, and just really missed being by the water. And I love the Pacific Northwest and the forest and all of that. And I was taking a walk with my son and I said, I just love it here. It's so nice. And he said, you should move here. And I thought, wow, maybe I should.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Life is short, right?
Yeah.
So why not?
How long was the commute, Tamara, between Astoria and Boise? I mean, it's
8
not,
hours. It's an 8-hour drive.
Okay, so it's not crazy long, but far.
Long enough. Yeah.
Long enough, yeah.
Yeah, so he and I talked about it, and I decided it probably wasn't a terrible idea. So
That's
hence
great. I
the
feel
journey
like
began.
Yeah.
Like parents listen to your kids.
They have good advice.
Yeah.
They have good advice.
Yeah.
So what did you consider when you were like weighing your options, where you are running this market and you're looking at stepping away? Like, what were some big things that you were considering when you were looking at that transition?
Well, for me, moving meant that I'd be part of a new community, and I love the community here. And it only has 10,000 people. Astoria is not that big.
Oh, wow, that's small.
Yeah, it's a small town, but it has. I'm always impressed with Astoria because it's such a vibrant community, and that's super important to me. I like being a contribution to my community. I like assisting with that vibrancy and gathering community. And there's a strong farmers market here. That's a Sunday farmers market. There's also a farmers market down in Seaside, which is 20 minutes away. So there are always jobs out there. So I wasn't super concerned about what was going to happen next, but I was super concerned about transitioning the Boise Farmers Market to someone so that it could continue to be super successful, because, I just spent the last 4 years busting my butt to make it successful. And I want to make sure that we carried on, and that the next person who came hopefully was even more experienced with nonprofit management than I am, so that they could take the market to the next level.
So I'm hearing from you in what you just said that you might not be stepping away from farmers markets altogether. Do I hear that you might get involved with farmers markets there?
I might.
All right.
That's good. There's also water in San Diego.
Yeah.
You like being by the water.
Sure. Great markets here, just saying. Well, I think that's important to remember, too. And I know Kat and I have gone through this when we've kind of transitioned away from some markets that we've been either started or heavily involved in running, and it's time for us to, move on from that, is like we've built this up into such a great market, which is something that you certainly did for Boise, and you want to make sure it's left in capable hands and that the market can continue and get better and all of that. So I think that's something that a lot of market managers think about when they are making decisions whether to, move on or stay with their market. So how did that kind of go for you? Like, how did you give your notice or approach your higher ups at the market, and like how far in advance did you do that before you moved away?
Well, I gave them 60 days. And then that didn't quite work out. So the way it worked was I called our board president and just said, I'm going to be stepping away. Just want you to know, I'm going to write a formal letter to the board, but I want you to be aware, and I want you to know that I want to do a really great transition, and I want us to find the most perfect person and all of that. And then they advertised 2 positions, the market manager position and the executive director position, which makes sense for the trajectory that the Boise Farmers Market is on. They need a bigger staff, and they need a well-experienced staff. So they hired, and those first 2 people didn't work out. So that was, I don't know, back in May, maybe, I'm not even sure. So at that point, I said, well, I'll take the executive director position until we can regroup and recruit again. And my assistant, who had been, working the farmers market with me every single Saturday, by the time this happened, I had already moved to Astoria. Like, I had bought a house and moved. So I did the executive director position remotely, and Annie took over the farmers market. And she did a great job this summer filling in, and will be farmers market manager again this summer, I believe.
Oh, great.
So
Great.
Oh, that's nice. It's kind of nice when you leave a position and they have to have 2 people replace you. You're like, oh, yeah, that's the kind of job I was doing.
I'm thinking 4 of me. What do you think?
At least. At the very least.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But it's good because it gives them more capacity to do bigger things in the community. So
Yeah, that's always important to understand, too. I think if you're in a position where you're doing like 2 really big jobs, really, as one person, if you are looking at moving on, maybe suggesting that they, increase the amount of people doing the job, because then they can just do more and deeper work with each of those positions. So
especially if it's like a new person that hasn't, that doesn't know all those systems like the back of their hand, like somebody like Tamara has. Well, that's great. At what point did you talk to your vendors? Because I know that, is a big thing, especially from a market manager position. Like, the vendors look to you as the leader of the wacky farmers market, and you have specific relationships with them. And I think that at least here in San Diego, it might be different in other areas, but a lot of our vendors do a lot of different markets. And so there might be a concern of like, how is the market going to change when this person leaves? So how did you let your vendors know you would be leaving, and how did they respond?
As soon as the board knew and we were clear that we were going to announce a position, then I went around and talked to all the vendors on Saturday.
Smart.
And then, for those who weren't there, I sent out a general email after that to our entire vendor list that just said, I'm going to be transitioning out. We're going to find an awesome market manager. And, I told them it's not going to be the same, because you're not going to have the same leader with the same passions and the same way of looking at things. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be an awesome farmers market. It'll be even better than it is now, because you'll have someone who is fresh and has new ideas, and it's going to be great. And so, there were a few who were like, no, you can't leave.
Yeah.
Over the space of a couple of weeks, they became very understanding, and they're excited. And especially, if you're moving to a town like Astoria, where there's water and, it's really gorgeous, they're like, Astoria, we want to move to Astoria.
They'll all follow you over in that market. It'll get much bigger, I'm sure.
Everybody's coming.
Everyone's coming along.
I'm sure they're so happy for you too, because, when somebody works really hard, you're excited for them to be able to like do what they want to do and follow their dreams.
Yeah.
What was it like? We're going to talk a little bit more about all the work that it took to find your replacement for executive director. But what was it like with that transition of like hiring a new market manager, it not working out, and then your assistant filling that role? Did that person that was hired, did they actually like take the role and get introduced to vendors, or was... Okay, Tamara's shaking her head yes. So can you tell us a little bit about that somewhat odd moment and like how you guys kind of got through it?
You did to come back and be like, I'm back.
Gotcha.
Just kidding.
We did hire someone, put her in the position. She met all the vendors, started doing the work. People met her. She was there for 3 or 4 weeks, and it just didn't click. I mean, it just became apparent that it wasn't going to work out. And at that point, it just is what it is. You have to be honest about it. You just have to say, look, we hired her. She tried it on. It didn't work out for her. And so we're going to move on. And so now this is what we're going to do in the interim while we look for another human to take this place. So really it was, and people were understanding. I mean, I think when you're in a position like that and it's not working, people know it's not working.
Yeah.
So, and it's better to like let it go and start over than to try to force it. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it impacts so many people. Like there's so many businesses involved, and like, that's people putting food on the table for their families. So if you're kind of trying to like smash a round peg into a square hole, it's like, it's just going to hurt everybody if it's not working out.
Yeah. It was just better to cut the losses and move on.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that was disconcerting for the vendors and farmers. That probably made them feel a little insecure. But the fact that you were still around and were able to move back in, I'm sure that gave them a huge comfort level that you weren't going to let this be taken over by somebody that just really wasn't a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they all know Annie. And so it was not hard to transition her into the market manager position. She's young and fun and lively, and she makes a good impression, and they all like her. So that wasn't too difficult. But yeah, I mean, there was a moment where we all went, uh-oh, now what are we going to do?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And as a market manager, it is somewhat of like a public facing role, and you have relationships with your community, relationships with your shoppers and other businesses in the area. At what point did the shoppers in the community hear the news, and how was that received? Like, what was it like to kind of let those people that you see every weekend know that there's going to be a new face of the market?
Yeah, that was interesting. We kind of rolled it all out at the same time because we didn't feel like we could make a job announcement without obviously telling our farmers market community first. And so I put a little note in our newsletter. We told people at the market. We told our key constituents first. I mean, obviously, the people who donate to us regularly and those people who really are attached to the farmers market, we let them know first. And but we let our audience know before we advertised for the job. And they got some very kind emails saying that they were sure that the farmers market couldn't run without me, which is very sweet, but not true. Yeah.
Sometimes that is true. I feel like, though, it's like, oh no, like market managers will leave, and I'm like, oh, that market's not the same.
That one's dead.
Yeah, like let that one go. So I mean, if you're doing a really great job, sometimes it probably feels like that to your shoppers and people who have been with you.
I think change is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Change happens all the time anyway, but it's always hard. So, but they were super supportive, and it turned out good. And they haven't met Amber yet. She was just hired. The executive director was just hired in December. So this will be her first market season, but she'll be awesome.
I'm so glad that you mentioned putting it in your email newsletter. I mean, I think those are like little things that we forget that they're like, those are landing in people's inboxes. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit more of like an intimate way to communicate with your audience than just like posting on Instagram. So, maybe just because I don't do the email newsletters, I forget. That's Bridget's job, so I just forget about them sometimes. But
I think about them 24 hours a day. So, such a good idea, though. That's very like a personal message that you can send out to people who really like are involved in your market in a deeper way. If they're reading their email newsletter, it's like they're engaged. So that's information that they definitely want.
Yeah, and they also, I mean, in terms of hiring, they might have suggestions of people that you could hire. That might be like a good pool to draw on, or they might forward that email to their niece that they know is looking for work or something like that. So I feel like that is an especially helpful tool if your market is hiring or you're looking for kind of one of these more higher up senior positions to make sure that you tap that pool of like diehard market fans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a good segue into what platforms did you use to post the job? So networking is one good way to get the word out there. Did you also kind of post a formal job description and offering on Good Food Jobs or Indeed, or what kind of platforms did you use?
We did. So we have the Idaho Nonprofit Association in Idaho, and they have a job board. Great. And that's actually where all of our awesome candidates came from. Actually.
Oh, good. Okay, good to know.
So we put it in our newsletter. We announced it on social media. We put it on Indeed. We put it on LinkedIn. We sent the announcement out on the reader board for the National Farmers Market Association, which that's not what it's called.
Farmers Market Coalition.
Farmers Market Coalition.
And actually, it was we put it in our newsletter at least once. So,
and you guys put it in your newsletter, and we sent it out to different nonprofit professionals in Boise, just so that they could let their networks know that the job was available. People like the executive director of the St. Luke's Foundation and, the bigger foundations, just to get the word out to those professionals who have run nonprofits, but maybe not a farmer's market.
Right. So that's probably not so much for the manager's position. And it sounds like the manager's position, you ended up going internal anyway in the end, which is great. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing that a lot with executive director positions. I'm working with a market in Pennsylvania. They just hired a new executive director, and she came from the Boys and Girls Club and, other nonprofits, not necessarily having anything to do with food, but really in the development side. And I know that I saw your job posting at one time because we shared it. And at the time that I looked at it, it seemed to be one posting for somebody to physically manage the market and be an executive director that had a lot of development responsibilities. I know you guys are working on a new permanent structure and things that are going to require significant fundraising. But it sounds like in the end you split that up into two jobs, right? Because I think I even commented to you, this is two jobs.
At least.
This is 8 jobs, so
I know. It's more like 4 jobs.
Exactly.
But yeah, we split it so that it was executive director, and fundraising falls under the executive director, and then market management and all of the physical market things fall under that position.
Yeah, really different skill sets and personality types too, I think, honestly. So what kind of response did you get? It sounds like you got it mostly from the Idaho Nonprofit Board. I was wondering, when you go to hire an executive director, we put out an ad for a market manager or an operations manager or a market assistant. And if we put them on platforms like Indeed or somewhere like that, we'll get a ton of responses, the vast majority of which are super irrelevant, like they're data programmers and things that just don't have any relevant skills. Is it different at the leadership level? Do you tend to get people who have actually read the whole job posting and have some experience that makes sense?
It's the same. I mean, it was the same. We got a lot of responses that were, we had one guy who would have been awesome, except he lived in New York. And I wrote to him and I said, you understand that this is in Boise, Idaho, right? And he was like, oh, I thought I could do it remotely. And I was like, how?
No, markets are kind of analog. Yeah.
If we could, we would have figured it out.
Yeah. I'd be on the beach in Hawaii if we could have figured that out.
Yeah.
So,
But we did get a lot of responses, like, 60 or 70, but out of those 60 or 70, there were probably only 15 that were even remotely qualified. And then, pretty easy to narrow that pool.
Yeah, great. So obviously your initial timeline was not that realistic. 60 days was not it. So Amber just got hired in December. I'm kind of doing the math here. So realistically, how long did it take to find a real reposement for you?
A solid 3 months, and
Gotcha.
Then the hiring process.
Oh, and then hiring. Yeah.
Yeah. So we reposted in October. No, we reposted in September, and it was open until like November 15th. We left it open for a long time. So that, and we also started interviewing like before we even closed the application process, just so that we could narrow the field. And then final interviews were in early December. And then the two final candidates, they had them actually make a presentation and present it to the board of what they would do in their first 60 days.
Oh, great.
Wow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought that was smart.
Yeah, that was smart. So who was involved in hiring? The whole board?
No, there was a hiring committee put together by the board.
Great. So sorry, go ahead.
And I helped.
And you helped. Yeah, which is good because you're the one that knows what you do. I'm just thinking about my business improvement district board trying to hire to replace me. If I wasn't there, I don't think they have a really clear idea what I do. So,
they just put a market T-shirt on that Christopher Columbus statue they've been trying to erect in Little Italy.
Oh, dear. So for a farmers market organization that's looking to make a big hire like this, what would you recommend in terms of timeline? Like, how much time should they allow themselves?
Start early. I would allow 6 months. I mean, if you have the leisure of time, I would allow 6 months to go through the process. And also, don't settle. If you do a round of applications and you get them all in and you look through them and you think, you know what, none of these people are really lighting us up, bag it and try again. Don't settle for less than what you're looking for. There's lots of good people out there. It's just a matter of reaching them.
That's really, really good advice.
That's
I know
a good
all
reminder.
of us. Yeah, and I'm sure it's scary when some exec directors maybe are not as considerate as you in terms of giving a lot of notice or making yourself available during that extended period if the time takes longer than they think. And of course, there's exec directors where something happens to them, they get sick, or or their family moves and they're actually they're in New York and they can't do it remote.
A new demanding job where they just can't handle doing both.
Yeah, so ideally you allow this much time. I guess if you don't have this much time, things get a little scarier. Maybe good idea if your board does know what you do, that can at least keep the essential parts going.
Yes. Well, and I think it's really important as a market manager, if you're thinking about leaving your organization, there are things that you need to do that you should be doing anyway, like gathering up all the passwords and keeping that document updated and keeping an annual calendar of everything that's going on and the timeline for each of those things. And, your contact list of all the people, from the people you rent toilets from to the dude who does the ATM machine to, your favorite guy that blocks off the streets that you want to work with. All that stuff, we all should have it anyway, but you should definitely have it if you're thinking about transitioning out of your job.
Yeah, that's such a good point. We are always reminding ourselves of this, and we joke about it and we talk about it on the podcast a bunch, but like, what if like one day Bridget got hit by a bus and we just had to recreate everything that was in her brain? That would be really hard. So making sure that your organization has those living documents that then you can just say, all right, here's it all laid out for you. Obviously, that'll need explanation and it needs training that goes along with it. But if you are gathering your stuff all in one place and it's really laid out, it'll just make that, the handing off a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think that's such a great reminder. And it's kind of something you could think of as a market manager, even if you're not planning to leave your position, like you have no intention to do that. Maybe act as though you are, like, internally. And so you're just laying those systems out and getting those things kind of down just in case you ever do want to leave, then it doesn't feel so daunting. Or if you get a really great opportunity that you want to take that doesn't allow for a lot of transition time, then you have that material all ready to go. And I think that's important. I'm in like a board of director president role right now at my kid's school. It's a nonprofit and it's a 2-year term. And I feel like at that role, I'm writing everything down. I'm keeping everything really organized and like preparing for the next person that's going to take over. And I'm constantly thinking like, I should be doing more of this at my job, even though I'm not leaving my job. Like it's nice to get that material down in case of any kind of situation like you had, like you're doing a great job at the market, but then an opportunity comes up, you want to live in a different place. It's like that happens to market managers. So having that stuff ready to go will save a lot of trouble for you and also for whoever takes over for you.
And in a less drastic situation, what if you just want to take a decent vacation?
Well, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That?
Yeah. What's that strange V word you just said?
Yeah.
I don't recognize it.
Yeah. So many of us just keep going. And it's like, oh, well, I can't really take more than 6 days off because then the big market's going to happen again and nobody else knows how to do that. So just in the interest of in the long term, making your job a little bit more reasonable and being able to take some vacation time, some time off. It's a good idea to memorialize all that stuff. Tamara, were you the kind of person that was doing that anyway? Did you have a good legacy binder, as they call it at FMC? Did you have all that stuff written down?
We had just the previous year gone through job descriptions. And so out of going through the job descriptions, even though I was wearing 2 or 3 of the job hats.
Yeah.
Out of that, I did put together, I always do an annual calendar and I always do timelines for things, but I did put together something that if I was not there, someone could have opened the document and been like, oh yeah, I see how this works throughout the months. Like with, this is when the dates are, this is when you start prepping, all of that sort of thing. So some of it did exist, not all of it. And it's interesting, you find when you're transitioning a new person into your job, suddenly you're like, oh yeah, that password isn't on the list, is it? Or, oh no, I didn't actually give you the name and phone number for those people. So, for the Lions Club, because they give us $1,000 a year for the Sprouts Kids Club, which is amazing. But if you don't know who to call, it's hard to ask for that money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe we should all just pretend once a year for a couple of weeks that we're on our way out and we need to double check all those lists and see if they're ready.
We'll get too
And
excited.
that takes some time to prep that stuff too.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight. That takes some serious, like you got to take an afternoon a few times to like really think through the whole thing, what you do each year and all of that, and make sure everything's on paper and readable.
Yeah, I think having a timeline and like a detailed calendar is probably really helpful because it's like, oh, like in July, the Lions Club pays us this thing. So it's like thinking about what happens throughout the year instead of thinking of the whole year, what happens. It's like what happens this week of the month, what happens this month of the year. Kind of breaking it down could be really helpful.
I think it makes it less scary too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm wondering in terms of like it sounds like your executive director that you brought in is really awesome and she has a lot of experience in nonprofits. Was there any like specific onboarding you had to do to explain the unique nature of operating a farmer's market and how that might be different from a different nonprofit organization? Or is that something that they just kind of got and they understood or was there any like downloading that had to be done about farmers market specifically?
We did a lot of downloading. So I was like, okay, so here's how a market day works. We arrive at 6 a.m. We open up the pods. We drag out all the stuff. I mean, literally, I walk through every action that happens at the farmers market, and then every action that happens post farmers market to wrap up the Saturday, and then walking through the week, what we do to prep for the online store, prep for the regular farmers market, get our double up food bucks and Sprouts tokens and all that figured out for the weeks. So literally, there was a big download around the timeline of how things actually function. And even though she's not the market manager, she has to know that, because the market manager isn't going to work every single Saturday all year long.
Or they could leave.
And and so she definitely needs to know the procedures. And then, the online store is a whole other thing. We walked through, how do you help a vendor put their products in, all of that stuff too. So and then walked through the development schedule and when we usually approach people and other ideas that I had for people she could approach for sponsorship and all of that. So yes, there was a lot of very specific download going on.
And then how much time? So Annie, since she's been working with you for a while, obviously she had a lot of time kind of shadowing you or working alongside you. So that was probably a little bit easier for her to get the rhythm. How much actual physical time were you able to get with Amber, since she came on, quite a bit later in the process? And
I spent the last week of the year with Amber.
So just 1 week.
So I spent 4 days, 4 days solid.
In the middle of the holidays, where people's attention is obviously completely
like
clear.
Merry Christmas.
So I know what happens in a lot of cases is the departing person, if the organization can talk them into it and they're not going into another really high-pressure job, sometimes stays available as an advisor and a consultant or, on that basis. Are you doing something like that? Is she still able to reach out to you if she has a question, if something pops up and she says, okay, I know I got downloaded and I had that really long 4-day training, but what does this mean?
No, we do. Yes. I'm available by email or call or phone anytime for them. And I have a contract with them to help get them transitioned into the farmers market season.
That's great. And I think that's a good reminder for our listeners, anybody that's in a management role, is that if it's possible for you to do that, obviously you want that legacy to keep going. You've built this wonderful market. You want it to keep happening. So you want to be available to answer questions, and your time is valuable, and your knowledge that you've built up over the years is really valuable. You shouldn't be just at your hourly rate at that point. You should be charging for all those years that you accumulated knowledge and developed systems. So if you're on your way out and you're going to say, hey, feel free to drop me an email or give me a call if you have a question, set up something in advance where there's a way for you to get paid for that, because you've got a life. You got to support yourself. You did the work to achieve that knowledge, and you should make sure that you have a system for getting compensated.
Definitely. And make sure that your price is high enough that they're going to think twice before they call you, because that second thought generally can solve the issue.
There you go. That's the best advice ever.
I should tell my husband that when he asked me to find something for him, like, where's my thing? I'm like, all right, you're going to have to pay me $50 if I find it for you. So
you might want to look a little harder.
My usual response is like, look again, and then they find it. So it's true. Like, if you give them, if you make it a little bit harder for them to just reach out with any old question, they'll probably figure it out.
My husband has that theory that if somebody calls you, never answer on the first round, because if you give it at least 30 minutes, good chance they'll keep running through their Rolodex and somebody else will manage it for them.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So any takeaways from the whole experience, Tamara? Are there things that you would do differently if you had it to do again, or would recommend that other farmers market organizations do?
It took more time and effort than I thought it would. And so don't think that you know how that's going to go, because it's just going to be what it is in the moment. I think it's really important to remember that you're transitioning out. And as I told Amber probably a million times while we talked, you can do this however you want to do it. Once I'm gone, this is how we've done it for the past couple of years. And so I'm just going to show you exactly what we did. And then you can do it exactly the same, or you can change it. Totally up to you. So, and I think the big thing that market managers need to remember is you have to let go.
I think that's huge. It's so easy to think, oh, well, they need to do it this way because this is how I've always done it. But really what they need to do is achieve this result. And the way they do it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the way that you did it. And that's hard if you've been doing something for a long time to remember.
But they might come up with a more efficient way or something that is not so
more
hard
fun,
or
more efficient,
better, fresh ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so
that's a really good point, though.
That's a lesson I have to keep working at, actually, because I've been doing the same thing for so long that I feel like this is the way you do it. And so we're on some of the things that we do, vendor applications and things, we're trying to do a little differently and see how that works. Maybe the new way will work better. Maybe I'll have to drag people back to my method. We'll see.
Maybe it's just different.
It's just different. It's fine.
For sure. So wrapping up, Tamara, what's next for you?
So I am taking a couple of months to get to know my new neighborhood and my new part of the world. And then I will be looking for employment. So either, something that has to do with community. I love working in nonprofit. I don't see myself working in a for-profit business. Probably nonprofit management or maybe even farmers market management. Who knows?
Who knows? We'll see what happens.
Fun.
I know in the meantime, Tamara has become kind of a part of our Farmers Market Pros consulting team. She's going to be working with us on a project or two in the next year or two on the side while she figures out what's next. We would love to see you stay in the farmers market industry, obviously, because you are such a special part of it, and we like working with you.
Yeah, well, it will be fun to see long-term where you land and all the awesome things you do and the organization and just brain power that you'll bring to whatever you apply yourself towards next.
Thank you. Yep. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yep.
You never know.
You never know. Well, really great conversation about making this kind of shift, and I think will be really helpful for any of our listeners. I know we get a lot of feedback from our podcast listeners and just everybody in our Farmers Market Pros realm, either people that are looking to leave their role and looking for a replacement or just thinking long term, like how will that work eventually? So this has been really helpful information just for anyone in that space.
Or for organizations that are looking to hire. I feel like you really helped kind of like gauge expectations and like how other markets can approach the hiring process. Just, give yourself more time.
Yeah.
So.
Time. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much. This is a great conversation, and we always like talking with you. And, of course, we'll just have to have you back on when you land where you land if you're in the farmers market space and see how that's going, transitioning in instead of out, I guess.
Yeah.
That's right.
That would be fun.
All
Thanks,
right.
Tamara.
Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to Food for All, making it easy to sell local food online for pickup at farmers markets, build relationships, and improve margins. Find more information by clicking their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Farmers markets are all about connection, and all of us, operators, farmers, and vendors, keep learning. Connect with people just like you from various parts of the country and share what's happening in your area in the terrific conversations over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. If you're actively involved in a farmers market, please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros or email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. If you're looking for further education, check out our online course offerings at farmersmarketpros.com. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll have another great episode next week, so tune in.